My name is Olivia, I'm 32 years old, and at my own father's 70th birthday party, my sister raised a glass, called me a loser, and told me to pack my bags because she was selling our family home from under me. Before I tell you about the one quick call I made that brought their entire world crashing down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's good to know you're out there. It all began with a promise, the kind you make with your heart, not your words. 2 years ago, my world tilted on its axis. My mother, my anchor, lost her battle with breast cancer. I was living in Chicago at the time, finally hitting my stride. I'd just landed a significant promotion at a top marketing firm, and my salary was something I was truly proud of. I had a life, a future. But when I came home for the funeral and saw my father, Harold, adrift in the cavernous silence of the house they had shared for 40 years, I knew I couldn't leave. He looked like a ship without a rudder, and I was the only port in the storm. My older brother, Mark, a high school history teacher living 2 states away, called with his regrets. Liv, I wish I could, but with the kids' school and my job, it's just impossible. My younger sister, Rachel, a sleek financial advisor in the city, was more direct. I can't, Olivia. It's too emotionally draining. I wouldn't be any good to him. So the responsibility, as it always seemed to, fell to me. I called my boss, gave up my promotion, sublet my apartment, and packed up the life I had built to move back into my childhood bedroom. The first year was a long, gray hallway of grief. My days became a quiet rhythm of managing Dad's doctor's appointments, coaxing him to eat, and sitting with him on the front porch as the sun went down, the silence between us thick with unspoken loss. Mark's calls dwindled to once a month. Rachel's visits were brief and performative. She'd sweep in, all designer handbag and expensive perfume, kiss Dad on the cheek, spend 20 minutes scrolling through her phone, and then sweep out again, claiming a client emergency. My husband, Robert, had seemed supportive initially. "You're doing the right thing, honey," he'd said. He stayed in our apartment in the city, promising to visit every weekend. But the weekends became every other weekend, then just a quick Saturday visit. The distance between us grew for miles into an emotional chasm. I told myself it was the strain, the sacrifice. I was so focused on holding the fractured pieces of my father's life together that I failed to notice my own was cracking at the seams. My only true lifeline was my Uncle Walter, my mom's older brother. A retired mechanic with hands like worn leather and a heart of gold, he called me every single Sunday without fail. He wasn't afraid of the grief. He'd let me cry, let me vent, and he was the only person in the world who consistently asked the one question I needed to hear, "And how are you holding up, Liv?" About a year after Mom's death, a new person entered our quiet world. Dad met Patricia at a routine checkup. She was a nurse at the clinic, around 50, with a smile that seemed to radiate warmth and a gentle, capable air about her. She made Dad laugh, something I hadn't heard in a long time. She coaxed him out of the house for walks, got him interested in his old woodworking hobby again. I was genuinely, deeply happy for him. When he told me, his eyes sparkling with a life I thought was gone forever, that they were getting married, I was thrilled. The wedding was a small affair in the backyard, a bright spot in a long, dark year. Rachel even gave a toast, her voice smooth as silk, talking about second chances and new beginnings. But the light Patricia brought with her soon began to cast long, dark shadows. The change was subtle at first. Dad, always so sharp, started to have lapses. Not just misplacing his glasses, but a profound, troubling confusion. He'd forget entire conversations we'd just had. He'd wake up in the afternoon and think it was morning. Patricia was always there to smooth it over. "Oh, Harold, you old silly," she'd coo, patting his hand. "It's just his age, dear," she'd tell me, her expression a mask of loving concern. "We have to be patient." My gut, however, was screaming a different story. I started noticing things that didn't add up. I had managed Dad's medications for a year, a complex cocktail of pills for his heart and blood pressure. Suddenly, Patricia insisted on taking over. "You have enough on your plate, honey," she'd said. "Let me handle this." It's what I do. One day, I saw a new pill bottle on the counter, the label partially scratched off. When I picked it up to look, Patricia snatched it from my hand with a sharp movement that was entirely out of character. "Just a new vitamin supplement the doctor recommended," she'd said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Then came the whispered phone calls. I'd walk into a room and find Patricia on the phone, her voice a low murmur. The moment she saw me, she'd snap, "I have to go," and hang up. More often than not, I was sure the person on the other end was my sister, Rachel. The two of them had become incredibly close, a fact Rachel lorded over me. "It's so nice that Dad has someone who really gets him," she'd say, a subtle dig at my own relationship with my father. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I was living in my own home, but I felt like an intruder, a suspicious observer in a play where I didn't know the script. The moment of horrifying clarity came on a dreary Tuesday afternoon. I was coming in from the garden when I saw Patricia in the kitchen, her back to me. She was preparing Dad's afternoon tea, a ritual she had started. I stopped in the doorway, hidden by the shadows of the hall. I watched as she took a small, white, unlabeled pill from a vial in her pocket. She looked around quickly, then, with the back of a heavy spoon, she crushed the pill into a fine powder. She tipped the powder into Dad's teacup and stirred it in until it dissolved completely. Time seemed to stop. The air in my lungs turned to ice. My heart didn't race, it felt like it had ceased to beat altogether. It was a silent, visceral confirmation of every fear I'd been trying to suppress. This wasn't age. This wasn't grief. This was a deliberate, calculated act of harm. She turned, a placid smile on her face as she saw me. "Oh, Olivia, you startled me. Just getting your father's tea ready." "What was that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her smile didn't falter. "Just a little something for his nerves, dear. His doctor and I think it's for the best." But I had been at his last appointment 2 weeks ago. The doctor had said his heart was strong and his nerves were steady. He had recommended tapering off medication, not adding new, mysterious ones. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the image of that white powder swirling into the tea burned into my mind. My first instinct was a primal scream. I wanted to storm into her room, drag her out of the house, and call the police. But my rational mind, the part of me that had built a career on strategy, took over. It would be my word against hers. The distraught, emotional daughter versus the calm, professional nurse and loving new wife. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would lose. I needed proof. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. The next morning, my hands were shaking so violently I had to grip the mouse with both of them. I went online and ordered the smallest, most discreet security camera I could find, one that looked like a simple phone charger. The 2 days I waited for it to arrive were an agony of forced smiles and polite conversation. When it finally came, I waited until Patricia was out grocery shopping and plugged it into the kitchen outlet with a clear view of the countertop. It felt like a profound violation, a desecration of my family's home. But then I pictured my father's eyes, clouded and confused, and I knew I had no other choice. With the camera silently recording, I turned my attention to the finances. I had access to Dad's online banking portal to help him pay bills, a task I hadn't done since Patricia had taken over the household management. A bill for the electricity was overdue, which was strange. Patricia was usually meticulous. With a churning stomach, I logged in. And there it was, laid out in neat digital columns. A series of small transfers, $250 here, $400 there, made every single month for the past 6 months. The amounts were carefully calculated to be small enough to fly under the radar. Each transfer went to the same account. An account under the name Rachel Miller. My sister. My successful, high-earning sister was bleeding our sick father dry. I printed every single statement, the pages feeling slick and toxic in my hands. The knot in my stomach tightened into a ball of ice. The final betrayal, the one that would ultimately break me and then remake me, came from the one person who had vowed to protect me. Robert. His distance had become a cold wall between us. He was visiting that weekend, for the sake of appearances before the big party. That evening, he fell asleep on the couch, his tablet lying on the coffee table. A notification lit up the screen. A message from R. Can't wait for this to be over. My breath caught in my throat. R for Rachel? No, it couldn't be. I was being paranoid, my mind poisoned by suspicion. But I couldn't let it go. I picked up the tablet. It was locked. My mind raced. I tried his birthday. Denied. His mother's birthday. Denied. Then, with a wave of nausea, I typed in our wedding anniversary. Click. It opened. The message thread was at the top of the screen. My world dissolved. It wasn't just a few messages. It was a novel of deceit. Months and months of it. Intimate photos, plans for secret hotel meetups, conversations filled with a casual cruelty that stole the air from my lungs. They talked about me, about my martyr complex. They talked about my father as a problem to be managed. And then I saw the most recent messages, from just that week. Rachel, he's getting foggier. Patricia's stuff is working perfectly. The POA is as good as mine. The party is the perfect time to announce it. Robert, good. The sooner we sell the house, the sooner this divorce is done and we can be together. I can't stand pretending with her anymore. Rachel, just a little longer. Once we have the money from the inheritance, we're free. And Olivia will have nothing. She'll be exactly what she looks like, a pathetic loser with no job and no husband. Robert, she won't see it coming. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. I felt a strange, terrifying calm wash over me as I stumbled to the bathroom and locked the door. I slid down the cool tile wall, my body trembling uncontrollably. It felt like a physical assault. A punch to the gut, a knife in the back, all at once. My sister and my husband. This wasn't just an affair. This was a conspiracy. A coordinated attack on every front of my life. They were systematically dismantling my family, my finances, my marriage, and my sanity. A sound bubbled up from my chest, and to my horror, it was a laugh. A hollow, broken, unhinged sound that scared even me. I was at the absolute bottom. And then my phone buzzed. It was Uncle Walter, his weekly call. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. I couldn't speak. I couldn't form words. But something made me answer. Liv? You there? You sound awful, he said. And the dam broke. The whole sordid, unbelievable story came pouring out of me in a torrent of choked sobs and ragged breaths. The pills, the camera, the bank statements, the texts. I told him everything. He listened, his silence a comforting, solid presence on the other end of the line. When I finally ran out of words, there was a long pause. Okay, he said, and his voice was different. The usual warmth was gone, replaced by something hard and cold, like forged steel. Okay, Olivia. You let it all out tonight. You cry, you scream, you break something if you have to. Because tomorrow, we start fighting back. That call was the turning point. The despair didn't vanish, but it transformed. It hardened from a drowning flood into a single, sharp point of focus. This was no longer just about my pain. This was about protecting my father. This was about justice. The next morning, I was a different person. The grief-stricken daughter was gone. In her place was a woman with a mission. I called Michael, my lawyer friend. I didn't cry. I laid out the facts calmly, methodically, as if I were presenting a marketing strategy. Wow, he said after a long silence. Okay, Olivia. They're playing dirty, so we have to play smart. Very smart. Our first priority was Dad. We had to get him assessed by a neutral party, away from Patricia's influence. I fabricated a story about a special father-daughter trip to a museum he loved. Patricia was suspicious, but she couldn't object without revealing her hand. Instead of the museum, I drove Dad straight to the office of Dr. Capper, a renowned geriatric specialist Michael had on retainer. While Dr. Capper ran a battery of tests, Uncle Walter and I met with Michael. He had already drafted the necessary documents. 2 hours later, Dr. Capper entered the conference room, his face grim. Mr. Miller's cognitive baseline is remarkably sound, he announced, looking over his charts. However, his blood work shows significant levels of unprescribed sedatives, systematically administered over a period of time. It's my professional opinion that without these substances, his confusion would largely dissipate. He is, without question, of sound mind to make his own legal and medical decisions. That was the linchpin. Michael brought Dad into the room. I explained the situation to him gently, shielding him from the raw ugliness of the betrayal. Dad, some people are trying to make bad decisions for you and your health. This document, I said, pointing to the new healthcare power of attorney, lets me and Uncle Walter protect you. It puts us in charge of your care. He looked from me to Uncle Walter, his eyes, clearer now than they had been in a year, filled with trust. He picked up the pen, and though his hand trembled, his signature was decisive. The first wall of my fortress had been built, and it was built on a foundation of truth. The days leading up to Dad's 70th birthday were a masterclass in deception. I played my part to perfection. I was the dutiful, slightly overwhelmed daughter. I discussed the catering with Patricia. I confirmed the guest list with Rachel, listening to her fake sympathy about how much I had on my plate. I even managed a strained but civil conversation with Robert, who was coming to the party to play the role of the supportive husband one last time. Their arrogance was my greatest asset. They saw a doormat. They had no idea they were walking into a meticulously laid trap. The night before the party, I packed my bag. Not a suitcase of clothes, but a sleek, black leather briefcase. I laid each piece of my arsenal inside with the precision of a surgeon. The USB drive with the damning video files. The stack of highlighted bank statements. The notarized copies of Dad's new, ironclad power of attorney. Dr. Capper's signed, explosive medical report. And finally, the printed transcripts of the text messages, each word a testament to a breathtaking betrayal. I snapped the briefcase shut. The click echoed in the silent room like a promise. The party was exactly as they had envisioned it, a public spectacle of their supposed virtue. The garden was filled with their friends, the air thick with false sentiment. Dad was seated like a king on a throne, looking confused but pleased by the attention. Patricia was the ever-present, doting wife. Rachel was the belle of the ball, the perfect daughter. And Robert stood by my side, his hand on the small of my back, a gesture of ownership that now made my skin crawl with revulsion. Then, Rachel tapped her glass for the toast. A hush fell. "I'd like to say a few words," she began, her voice ringing with practiced emotion. "For my wonderful father. It's been a difficult time, and it's become clear he needs a level of professional care we simply can't provide here." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, her eyes locking with mine. "That's why Patricia and I, using the power of attorney Dad entrusted to me, have made the difficult decision to move him to the wonderful Golden Meadows Senior Facility next month." A smattering of supportive murmurs went through the crowd. I saw Dad's face cloud over with confusion. He started to speak, but Patricia placed a calming hand on his arm, silencing him. Rachel saved her final, most public blow for me. "And of course, this means this big old house is simply too much to maintain. So we'll be putting it on the market immediately." She gave me a look of pity so profound it was almost comical. "Which means, Olivia, it's time to pack your bags, loser." A few people actually clapped. Robert gave my shoulder a sympathetic squeeze. The humiliation was a physical force, a hot, prickling wave that washed over my skin. This was it. Their moment of absolute triumph. But I didn't crumble. I didn't even flinch. I held her gaze, my face a blank canvas. Then, I turned my back on her, walked calmly through the stunned crowd, and stepped into the house. I pulled out my phone. "Michael," I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. "It's time." Minutes later, a new dynamic entered the party. 3 figures appeared at the garden gate: Michael, immaculate in a dark suit and carrying his own briefcase; Uncle Walter, his face a thundercloud of righteous anger; and Dr. Capper, exuding an air of calm authority. The cheerful music seemed to stutter and die. They walked with purpose, parting the crowd like a ship through water. Rachel's victorious smirk faltered. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Michael ignored her, addressing the assembled guests. "Good evening. My name is Michael Stanwyck. I am Harold Miller's personal lawyer." "I'm his lawyer." Rachel spat, brandishing her now useless document. "That document was legally revoked 3 days ago," Michael stated flatly, placing our new power of attorney on the table with a definitive thud. "This is the current, legally binding document, which names Olivia Miller and Walter Prescott as sole decision-makers regarding Mr. Miller's health and assets. Any action taken without their express consent is void." Rachel's face went slack with shock. "That's impossible. He's not competent to sign anything." On the contrary, Dr. Capper stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of medical authority. "I performed a full assessment on Mr. Miller this week. He is of sound mind. His recent confusion, however, is a direct result of being systematically drugged with unprescribed benzodiazepines." A collective gasp swept through the garden. Patricia began to tremble violently. "That's a monstrous lie." "Is it?" I asked, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. I held up a small remote. "The Wi-Fi here is excellent." I aimed it at the large TV we'd set up for a photo slideshow. The screen flickered to life, not with pictures of Dad's life, but with the cold, hard reality of my kitchen camera. The footage was damning. Patricia, day after day, crushing pills, stirring them into tea. The crowd watched, mesmerized and horrified. Patricia let out a strangled wail and sank into her chair, covering her face. Rachel, however, was a cornered animal. "This is a setup. She's always been jealous. She's incompetent, that's why I had to manage his finances." "Your financial management?" Michael interjected, dropping the thick stack of bank statements onto the table. "The statements that show thousands of dollars being transferred from your father's retirement account directly into yours?" Rachel stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The arrogance had been replaced by raw, primal panic. It was time for the final cut. The one that was just for me. I stepped forward, the printed text messages in my hand. "But it was never just about the money, was it, Rachel?" I looked from her venomous face to my husband's ashen one. "It was about getting everything you ever wanted, even if it meant taking mine." I read their words aloud. Their lust, their greed, their contempt for me. I read their plans for my divorce, for my inheritance, for my future. With every word, Robert seemed to shrink, to physically wither under the weight of his public disgrace. When I finished, Rachel finally broke. "You bitch," she shrieked, her face a twisted mask of fury as she lunged at me. "You ruined everything." Before she could lay a hand on me, Uncle Walter moved with surprising speed, stepping between us like a human shield. She stumbled back, her final, violent gambit failing as spectacularly as all the rest. The show was over. The aftermath was swift and clinical. Someone had called the police. 2 officers arrived, their presence bringing a sober finality to the scene. Patricia, babbling and incoherent, was taken in for questioning regarding elder abuse. Faced with the evidence, her confession was immediate. Robert was told to leave by Uncle Walter, who followed him to the edge of the property to ensure he went. He tried to catch my eye one last time, a pathetic plea for a mercy he didn't deserve. I looked right through him. Rachel simply deflated. Her friends, the ones who had been cheering her on minutes before, now avoided her gaze, melting away into the night. She was left alone in the center of the garden, a monument to her own greed and cruelty. When the last car had pulled away, leaving only the wreckage of the party behind, I went to my father. He was sitting up straight, the fog already lifting from his eyes. He took my hand, his grip firm. "I'm so sorry, Livy," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm so sorry." "It wasn't your fault, Dad," I said, my own tears finally falling. "It's over now." The following months were a blur of legal proceedings and quiet healing. Michael was relentless. Robert, facing the threat of criminal charges, agreed to a divorce settlement that left him with nothing but his own shame. Patricia faced the full consequences of the law. And Rachel, disowned and disgraced, simply vanished from our lives. Mark, my brother, flew in the next weekend. He didn't offer excuses. He showed up with a toolbox and spent 2 days fixing every little thing that was broken around the house. It was his silent, heartfelt apology, and I accepted it. Dad's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. With the poison out of his system, his wit and warmth returned. We hired a wonderful caregiver to help, and I found my professional footing again, taking on freelance marketing clients from my home office. That fall, we finally took the trip to Lake Tahoe. As we sat on a dock, skipping stones across the glassy water, Dad turned to me. "You know," he said, "sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just clearing the path for what's meant to be." He was right. The fire of that betrayal hadn't just burned me, it had forged me into someone new. Someone stronger. On the back of a napkin, I sketched out an idea: the Herald Foundation, a small nonprofit to provide legal resources for families dealing with elder abuse. My pain would become my purpose. I took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a loser. I wasn't defined by their betrayal. I was Olivia. A daughter, a sister, a survivor. And for the first time in a very long time, I was completely and utterly free. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I feel it's important. My question for you all is, if you were in my shoes, what would have been the hardest part for you to forgive? The betrayal by your sister or your husband? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. You're not alone.